thank you so much for sitting with me.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Of course. So I want to first talk about what exactly your company does. Can you explain Sonoro for me?
Yeah, so Sonoro is a global entertainment company. So we develop audio first IP, so concepts that start as podcasts, primarily with Latino creators around the world, so in English, Spanish, or bilingual. And then we take that IP and develop it into TV, film, books, event series, merchandise, e-commerce, basically everything under the sun.
So cool. So tell me about your founding story. What were you doing before, and then how did this company come about?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it all really started as when I was in childhood, honestly. I've always been in love with storytelling. That's what brings me the most passion and the most joy. And when I was little, it really started in books and video games and TV shows that I loved. And so I always knew I wanted to do something in the entertainment or storytelling space. Right after college, my first job was actually in nonfiction storytelling. So I was at the LA Times for about 4 years. I was in this very small sort of R&D unit within the company that was tasked with developing new forms of revenue streams and essentially looking at the journalism as IP for the company and figuring out how do we take this beyond the written word, beyond the website and beyond the print paper. And so in that sort of journey, I came across audio and podcasting as this really great way to develop IP and make it grow and sort of enhance the audience that we already had. And so in 2017, I was part of the team that launched Dirty John, which was the first podcast LA Times ever produced. It was this insane true crime story, and it was sort of a runaway success. Today it has over 80 million downloads, and that was the first time that I saw audio as an IP property being used to develop all different types of media. So that show went on to become a scripted TV series on Bravo, an unscripted documentary on Oxygen, a book. It had a written component in the print paper and in the online magazine. So it was already sort of having all these touch points. And to me, that was like a very big sort of aha moment that as someone that always loves stories and content, this was sort of like the next frontier or the next medium where that experimentation and excitement was going to come from. And also because it was so democratized and still is, it's a pretty accessible medium. And so for someone like me, I was Latina, born and raised in Miami, looking to bring more Latinos into the broader entertainment ecosystem, it felt like a really great place to do that. So I spent the next sort of 3 years launching about a dozen podcasts with the LA Times. And then at that point sort of felt ready to go and build something more from the ground up. It was a little bit of mini startup within a larger organization at the time and gave me, I think, the entrepreneurial itch to really get with my co-founders and start Sonoro.
How did you go from like being a journalist, a storyteller, someone who's behind the scenes, to then kind of being a founder, and how did that feel to make that leap?
Yeah, so I mean, I was on the business side, so I feel like I was always a little bit behind the scenes, and really, I was really excited to be able to work with the journalists who were the storytellers at that point, to develop ideas and to sort of talk high-level creative content strategy, but really to think also about the broader purpose and the broader strategy of that business. So I was always sort of in that behind the scenes role. And so today in Sonoro, I'm head of content. So I'm still sort of playing that role where I'm thinking about what we're making, why we're making it, and also constantly interfacing with our creators, so our writers, directors, producers, et cetera, and also our partners that allow us to sort of produce and launch these properties first in audio and then beyond.
Awesome. And how did you meet your co-founders, and what was that like? How did you decide, okay, we're gonna make this company and make it happen?
Yeah, it was really serendipitous, honestly. I had been feeling for a while, like I said, that I was sort of itching to start something new, and really was just introduced to them by a mutual friend of the industry, and they both come from sort of complementary backgrounds to myself. So I was coming from this very content-focused role where I was thinking about IP and thinking about the growth of that. Our CEO, my co-founder, came from more traditional media backgrounds and also had started up his own companies in other industries before, and so had that more boots on the ground experience. And our third co-founder is based in Mexico City, so he had sort of the flag posted in Latin America, which was really important to our growth and our sort of distinction as an entertainment company. And so I think when we all met, first and foremost, we all got along, which I feel like was very much an instant connection there for us. Yeah. We all had complementary backgrounds, complementary skill sets. We thought very similarly about building teams and operations and that sort of thing. And I think it just felt like it was the right place and the right time.
Very cool. Now, there's so many podcast companies out there today, obviously a lot of entertainment companies as well. How do you stand out from like the Wonderies of the world or other companies doing similar things, but maybe through a different lens?
Yeah, I think for us, first and foremost, we really believe ourselves to be an entertainment company. So for us, audio is really just that first step. It is, we want everything to exist beyond that. And like I said, it can be TV, it can be film, which is more what you've traditionally seen podcasts become. But this month we launched our first graphic novel, which is based on a podcast that we've produced. We have live events and tours with some of our podcasters that we're producing as well going into next year. So we're really thinking about it from like a 360 holistic approach, and audio being just that first step. And then separately, of course, for us, the focus really is the Latino community around the world. And there's 500 million of us. There's 500 million global Spanish speakers, 60 million US Latinos. And so to us, it's a niche that's not a niche, because it's just so vast and such a global community, not just for the audience, but also for the creators that we're working with. So for us, that is our big differentiator.
Very cool. Now talk to me about some of your favorite entertainment podcasts, books, shows that you've produced. What are some of your biggest hits?
Yeah, so I would say a big sort of genre that we're pursuing is really reinventing the telenovela. The telenovela is a multi-hundred million sort of industry and property, and we felt it was sort of due for a bit of a refresh. And so we've really doubled down on developing what we call sort of modernized telenovelas. So they're taking the tropes that you see in those series and keeping them and bringing them to life, because that's what we love. We love knowing, you know, the evil villain and the, you know, waking up from the dead and all of those sort of like crazy dramatics that we, as Latinos, a lot of us grew up loving. It's one of the biggest sort of through lines across sort of all of the cultures within the Latino community, but we're also making some twists and bringing them sort of into the modern world. And so our first sort of modern telenovela that we launched was called Princess of South Beach. So it was 36 episodes in English and in Spanish, had Rachel Zegler as the star, who now of course is on West Side Story and Snow White, and it just sort of hit it out of the park. It was a really funny dramedy about two twins separated at birth, set in Miami, and we just announced earlier this year that it's now in development at Netflix to become a series.
Oh wow!
So that's probably, I personally, again, I'm from Miami, so I had a little special place in my heart for a story set there. But it did really well, and it got the audience really excited.
How do you decide which studios and streaming studios to partner with, and what are you looking for in a partner? I
mean, I think for us, so one interesting thing of the way we think about our development of our IP is that the podcasts are really a proof of concept, right? And so we are experimenting with how to develop those from an audio series into TV show that might have 3, 4, 5 seasons. And so when we're looking for a partner for the derivative side, they're working with us on that vision typically of taking something that normally has sort of all the loose ends tied up by the end of a podcast series, right? So normally audio series are maybe 1, 2 seasons. And so we're really working with folks that see the creative vision for this to go on for potentially years. And that's really the main filter for us. It's like the partner that's gonna be the most excited, that really gets the vision for each individual story, that appreciates sort of the cultural connection to the Latino community as well, which sometimes is very overt, sometimes is very subtle. That to us, I think, is the biggest filter.
Amazing. So now I want to talk about your fundraising journey. Can you tell me about how much you've raised and what the process has been like for you?
Yeah, so today we've raised about $13 million. So our primary investors are Lair Hippo and Founder Collective and Greycroft. We have some really excellent media investors. Awesome. And again, I've been very lucky to have some great co-founders to go on that journey with. And I think that in a way, we were familiar and unfamiliar as a concept, right? Like people understood at the time we launched March 2020. At that point, there had been audio, I know, right?
That's a fun time to launch a company.
Interesting timing. But people understood conceptually to a certain extent the audio to TV and film pipeline. And I think where we had to sort of do more education in our pitches, frankly, was we're going beyond that. We really are thinking about this as a global entertainment company that's developing not just TV and film, but all of these other mediums and focusing on this global community. So I think there was a bit of familiarity there, which worked to our benefit, right? With sort of that pipeline that was growing and continues to grow. But I think it was a really great experience of sort of talking about a community that obviously I am from and I hold very dear, and the partners that we have on board today really sort of get that, which is great.
That's amazing. Would you say that there would ever be a world in which you could see yourself selling your company? And if so, what would it take?
That's a good question. No, absolutely. I think that's the ultimate goal for us. And I think it would just have to be the right partner. I think we still have a lot of really great shows in our pipeline that I want to get out into the world, but it'll all be similarly to how we're thinking about those individual derivative partners that sort of see the creative vision, understand it, and want to help us take it to that next level. I think that would be sort of a similar type of relationship that would have to be built.
Is there one business rule that you always operate by no matter what?
I don't think it's a business rule, but I think more since I'm really overseeing the content day to day, for me, it's like good ideas can come from anywhere. We don't have a very strict development process in the sense of who can bring ideas to the table or who can really vouch for something. I think that's important globally from our perspective of, you know, making sure that all of these stories that are coming from Latin America or coming from Latinos in the US and around the world that aren't typically taken a look at, we're taking a look at those. And also internally, like anyone on the team can bring forth an idea. And I think that's maybe perhaps not a business rule, but I think creatively how we're thinking about content development important to me, certainly.
Is there any type of pitch or any qualities that you'd say are like the best pitches that you get or the ones that you know are gonna take off?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, I think a lot of it becomes subjective at the end of the day, but I think I'm first and foremost looking for a creator who has passion for the idea. Like I really want to see that excitement and that drive to bring this world to life. Audio is a tricky medium if you haven't played in it before, and ultimately it's where all this stuff starts. And so we really need that excitement, that creativity, and that drive. And I think especially when we're starting in audio, the characters and the character development and those character arcs are sort of critical because primarily, obviously, you can play with sound to a certain extent to get action, but it's dialogue. It's dialogue. So it's really that character development and that character arc that I'm excited to take a look at when I look at a pitch.
Talk to me a little bit about your audience. You know, how many is it? How many in the US? How many globally? And who are the types of people that you're trying to reach?
Yeah, so today we have over 25 million global downloads. So that is across Mexico and Latin America, primarily Mexico, and then US Latinos. So we're split about 80-20 to LATAM and the US. And our audience is young. I mean, they're typically 18 to 35. They're in the bigger cities. In the US, they are where you would expect them to be for primarily sort of Latino-dominated cities in California, Arizona, New York, Florida, et cetera. But they're young and they're sort of excited and they're diverse and yeah.
Amazing. If you could go back in time and tell yourself something the day before you started your company, one piece of advice to yourself, what do you think that would be?
I don't know. I mean, I think I would probably just tell myself to trust myself and trust my gut. I think I was 26 when this started, which is really crazy to think about. And I had really just had that one work role. I mean, I had an incredible amount of responsibilities in that role previously to Sonoro, but this was the first big sort of career undertaking I was experiencing. So I think today I feel very sort of confident in my role, but obviously it took a minute to sort of feel comfortable being in a leadership position and leading we have about 60 people in LA, New York, and Mexico City. So it's a sizable team. So I would just say to trust myself and follow my gut.
That's great advice. I need to tell myself that sometimes too. What upcoming projects excite you, and is there any fun things in the pipeline for 2024 that you can share?
There are a lot of fun things in the pipeline. I would say I'm a big sci-fi fantasy nerd, like growing up and still today, that is the primary thing I consume. So we have a sci-fi project that I'm particularly excited about that we've been working on for a while. This really great creator who's done a couple stuff with Netflix, and he's just super visionary, sort of young director. I can't share too much about it, but it is about a young girl who sort of is dealing with the grief of losing her mother in space, or so she thinks, and there is an interesting technological aspect. So I'm very excited about that one. Again, personally, just a big fan of that type of content, and I think from sort of like an audio production piece, it's going to be very cool to do sort of those space scenes and then come back down to earth. Like it'll be a really exciting, immersive experience, I think, for people.
How do you decide like which medium a pitch or a story should fall into?
I mean, I think so for us, like I said, mainly the pipeline has to start in audio. That is sort of the business model that we've taken on. And so we're always looking at pitches through that lens. And I think we can be flexible about audio and push the boundaries, but we ultimately have to believe that it's a story you can see with your eyes closed a little bit, right? And so you have to work within the bounds of what's possible, I suppose, in sound design, but we have really great tech on our team. We have this, it's basically like a foam head it's like called binaural audio, and
cool.
you can sort of record the actors walking around this head to have it hear if you're wearing headphones. You can listen to it as if, especially for our horror series, things are creeping up on you or coming out from the corner or the side. So we're really trying to push the limits of what's possible, but ultimately it has to be something that you can see with your ears.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And last question for you, what do you want your legacy to be?
I mean, so I was just a little nerd when I was young. I was incredibly nerdy. I was, like I said, I loved fan fiction and sci-fi and fantasy and all that stuff. And part of the reason why I focused on storytelling as sort of the through line of my career and sort of personal choices and interests is because I just love the way a great story makes me feel. And I think like a lot of the community that is built online around those things is really special for a lot of people, especially that are outcasts when they're growing up. And so I hope that my legacy with Sonoro and beyond really is either facilitating or being a part of making these great shows that make people feel the same way I feel when I read a really great book.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with me.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me.